Alrighty, well, welcome everybody to Get with the Times. This is going to be an introduction to GitHub, and as you saw posted in the chat, I will be having more of a Q&A at the end, and so let's get started. So, hello, my name is Summer Sexton. I am currently a double major at both web design and informatics over at IUPUI, and I also am a Next Tech Catapult alumni. Now, what is the Catapult program? Well, I'm glad that you all asked. So the Catapult program is an immersive experience over the summer where high school students, like all of you, get to learn more about the tech industry in Indiana. If you want to learn more about it, I highly encourage asking your teachers because they probably have the information if they are having you all participate today. And as I introduced a little bit ago, my co-host who will be popping in and out of here is Willow, my cat. So if you see her, don't pay her much mind. I promise she just wants cat treats. So first and foremost, what is GitHub? Why does it matter? Who uses it? What is this entire thing that Summer is going to be rambling on about? Just what is it? Well, to keep it short and sweet, GitHub is an open source development platform, and it allows for secure collaboration between developers around the world. And so what will we delve into? Well, one of the bigger things that I'm going to walk you guys through and kind of show you a little bit about is GitHub repositories. A repository contains all of a project's files and each file's history. You can discuss and manage a project's work within the repository. It lets you share your code with everybody around the world, and it is a great resource if you are someone who has to do a team project for a class. You can get both of those people together on the same project and share the code. It's sort of like a way to share your Google Docs with friends. I'm sure that you all have done that at some point. And this is actually something that I use every single day, both in school and at work. But second of all, we're going to delve into collaboration. From sharing a page with GitHub Pages to sharing a repository, collaboration is definitely one of the best features that GitHub has allowed. And it is really what let GitHub become as big as it is. And that's what we're actually going to go with first. And so I really want to hit on the importance of collaboration. And I know you're probably sitting there already going, but Summer, we are all antisocial. We eat pizza and nachos in our basements. We hiss at the idea of the light of day. Why would we want to collaborate with each other? Well, here's the thing. Whether you like it or not, you are going to have to interact with other people during your life. I mean, hey, you guys are collaborating with me right now by joining my session. And so when you are a programmer, you have to go through what is called the software engineering process or the development lifecycle. You start with analysis, and that is, what are we coding and why? Then you go into the design. Now, if you're a programmer, normally you don't have to worry about this, but they got to make it look pretty. And if you go into programming as your field, that will be a major sigh of relief if design is not your thing. But you're going to have to collaborate with them. You need to know what you are coding. And then, of course, the next step is to actually code that design. Sometimes you'll have to go back to design and say, hey, I cannot code this feature. This cannot be done. Can we modify it? And even when you're coding with other people, you have to be able to say, hey, Joe, I am working on the home page. Can you work on the about and contact pages? Well, you want to be able to keep all that code in one place. And that is the great part about GitHub. It lets you have one project with like a gajillion different people, and all of you guys are sharing the same code in real time. This lets you fix bugs a lot easier. You can have your friend who is really good at finding where you forgot those semicolons. They can come right in, they can check it out, they can take care of it. And finally is implementation. You want the world to see what you just made. You want to be able to brag about it to friends and family. Well, that's another thing that GitHub lets you do. And once you do that, you also get to collaborate with developers around the world because you can have discussions on projects, being able to talk through what you made, to show people, hey, this is what I did, and how can I make it better? That is one of the best things that GitHub has definitely had to offer. So enough about the collaboration part. What can you actually do with GitHub? Now, there is 1,000 million trillion, so many things that you can do with GitHub that I definitely do not have enough time to get through it all. But I'm going to break it down into 3 of the most important things here. So number 1, coding. We all here have touched code in probably some way, whether or not we realize it. And that is one of the biggest parts that GitHub is used for. Whether you are going into game design, game development, web design or web development, cybersecurity, video, anything, GitHub has something for you. If you have ever been into Minecraft and you want to mod Minecraft, sometimes you'll find Minecraft mods are shared on GitHub. Sometimes you will find things like websites that you really like. You can find projects from even Microsoft. Microsoft itself uses GitHub. Spotify uses GitHub. And there are all sorts of tools that GitHub has to allow for code sharing and code development. One of their recent things that they came out with was Dependabot. So if you are like me and can't remember half of the things that you need to code, they can help you with that. If you use any IDE, especially Visual Studio Code and the IntelliJ suite, it automatically works with that. You can do pull requests to grab somebody else's code and a whole lot more. And I know I already touched on this a little bit, but sharing is another massive part of GitHub's features. You can add people to your projects. You can let people view your projects. In fact, actually how I am turning in all of my assignments in college, I'm submitting a GitHub link. So that way my teachers can both see my code and then also view it live. And you also can just have people from around the world go to that project and check it out. And hosting. If you've ever wanted to have your own website, it can be kind of a crazy field to navigate, where you want that hosted. Well, GitHub, if you have any repository on there, GitHub Pages allows for a basic static website to be made from that project, and it is completely free. Now, static is the important word here, and I can go into that a little bit more later, but essentially what that means is you won't be able to really do anything like PHP with it where it's interactive, but if you have just like a basic HTML and CSS website, you can display it for everybody. Now, GitHub has been used by over 83 million developers worldwide. So obviously, this isn't some little thing that has just showed up out of nowhere. And that is one of the most important things to remember when we're talking about this. This isn't some niche app that no one else has ever heard of before. Chances are, if you mention the word GitHub, they kind of know what you're talking about. And we're going to segue now into repositories. Now, repositories are a way to basically say, this is my project, have my project. It is kind of like a folder. And the thing about repositories is there are 4 crucial points of them. They are rather secure. GitHub has a lot of cybersecurity emphasis, and so they make sure all projects are safe. If you're going to a project on GitHub, it will be safe. And if it is not, GitHub has procedures in place for you to report them and say, hey, this shouldn't be on here. It's malware. They also allow, as I've said so many times before, for code sharing. You can check out the source code of a project to learn what was all used to make it. You can make a pull request for that project, and that lets you code it in your own space by downloading all of the code. You can send the link out to other people and just be like, hi, I made this. Look at it. Look at all the code I wrote, Mom. Be proud of me, even though I'm not a doctor. And collaboration. If you're working on that pesky group project that you had no choice in, but your teacher forced you to do, GitHub lets you have everybody join in on that project. And visibility. GitHub Pages allows hosting for everybody. And GitHub is one of those things that I can ramble about for ages, but it really won't make any sense unless we actually jump in. So let's hop in. And so here you are met with the lovely GitHub homepage if you are signed in. If I were to sign out, you would be met with one of those like generic welcome screens where it's like, hi, this is my advertising poster, use me. But that was my entire presentation. So to hop in, when you have a GitHub account, a lot of the things that you're going to see are really going to be relevant to two things: repositories and sharing. So if you kind of like have a look at the screen, it's definitely overwhelming at first, but you will see one of the most important things that I always use is my recent repositories. And here you can kind of get an idea on a lot of the stuff that I have made. And if you look, GitHub is really nice about making sure everybody kind of knows what they all have to offer. And it's really true when they say that GitHub is the home of all developers, including you. GitHub is free to use. It is on the web. It can work with a whole lot of things. And so as you kind of browse through here and see, wow, this is rather kind of crazy, it's because it is. What you can do with GitHub is definitely intense. But some of the other features that are really neat for GitHub to see, or for GitHub people to use and see, is if you're working on projects, you want to know what people have done to them. And so as you go beyond kind of the whole get started and what is GitHub, how do you learn it, you can see what people have done with your projects. Now, I'm doing a few collaborative things. You can kind of see I have my friends here who have been added to my projects, who have updated things, and it's sort of a, hey, what's going on, without having to look at 5,000 tabs at once. And another page that we are going to go to and check out here is the GitHub documentation. Now, as web developers, we all kind of know that at the end of the day, none of us are reinventing the wheel. Someone has invented it for us, and we're going to have to learn how to use it. Well, that's why I want to show you guys this page. And at the end of the session, I will be sure to ensure that these links are shared. GitHub Docs is essentially the entire documentation of GitHub. So if you have any questions at all on how it works, this is like your source of truth. This is your Bible. It has things from getting started to GitHub to how their accounts work, authentication, even to things that you will probably never use, like the REST API. I know some people might go into using it. I never have, just in full honesty, full disclaimer. But if you ever have any questions, look at the documentation. And this is something true for if you want to code something like a Discord bot, a Spotify bot, a game. Chances are your app will have some type of documentation. So if we want to go into GitHubs, we're just getting started. But I know we want to look at repositories. So if we delve into the repository section, it shows you all sorts of things about them. Now, here's where you can learn things simple to what your project is or crazy above and beyond. When it comes to repositories, as I've said in my presentation, a repository contains all of your project's files and each file's revision history. What that is let's say you've made 50 updates to a file, it shares every single version of that file in that repository. So if someone made an edit that you didn't like, you can go back to it. And in here, it kind of shows just more about what you can do with it. But one of the most important things that we're going to focus on is creating a new repository. Now, there are a crazy number of documents when it comes to creating a repository. I'm not going to make you guys read it, so we're just going to walk through making one together. So I'm on my homepage here to GitHub. I have recent repositories, and I'm just going to make a new one. And in here, you have all sorts of settings. Well, for the repository name, I'm going to call this Navigate Tutorial. And in the description, I'm going to say, this is my intro to GitHub's repository. Get out. I can't type. And this is one of your first critical features to think about when you're making a repository. Do you want it to be public or do you want it to be private? Now, when it comes to both types of repositories, no matter what it is, you are the one in power of who actually gets to upload code to it. But when it comes to who can see it, that is another question. If you are using it for an assignment, chances are you're going to have to make it public so that way your teacher can get onto it. But if this is a passion project that you want to keep kind of near and dear to your heart, go ahead and make it private. Or if you are currently working on something, make it private, and then you can always change it later to be public. So for now, I'm going to make it public. And one of the next important things to think about is, do you want a README? This is essentially that first file they're going to see. If you ever download something like a mod for a game, chances are there is a README in there. And it is exactly what the name says. They want whoever is on that project to read it, so that way they can learn more about it. For the sake of our setup, I'm not going to set one here because I'm going to show you one of the cool things that you can do using GitHub and Visual Studio Code. And when it comes to a git ignore, when you are making a lot of projects, especially if you ever use something called NPM or node modules, you will have a massive file, and sometimes you don't want everything to get uploaded to GitHub. That is what a .gitignore file is. And then there's a license. These are things that if you are really getting into a more professional space, you will use, but for our sake, I'm going to skip it. So, create repository. Ta-da! We have made our repository. And so, quick setup, if you've done this kind of thing before, there's your link. That's all you will need. But to kind of give you guys a bit of a tour, we have our code. First and foremost, that is where everything that people are going to look at will be at. And then we have issues. Is there a problem with the code? Find it there. Pull requests. If someone wants to look at your code or want to edit it for themselves, they will have to make a pull request. Actions. If you use GitHub Pages to deploy it, this is where you will get to see that process. Projects. That is an entire other thing that unfortunately I don't get to delve into today, but might another time if they invite me back. Security. This is where I was talking about the cybersecurity portion of GitHub. If you're interested in cybersecurity, I definitely recommend looking at GitHub's documentation on their security. There's a lot of cool things there. Insights typically offer things like, how has your code been used? If you have ever been a Twitch streamer, you've probably looked into Insights before. And then the project settings. There's all sorts of fun things that you can do in here. A lot of it you honestly ignore half of the time, but some of the most important things that you'll probably end up using would be collaborators. If you ever want to add someone onto your project, this is where you would add them at. Now, I'm going to hop over into one of the coolest features of GitHub. And basically, instead of having to upload a file to a project anytime you want, you can code in real time and send it right over. I'm going to copy this link right here, and I'm going to go over to my Visual Studio Code. Now, Visual Studio Code is normally a program on your computer, but lately they have rolled out a browser version. And so that's what I'm going to be using today. I'm going to go to my source control and open a remote repository. And you will see here automatically, this program made by an entirely different company already says, hey, do you want to use GitHub? And we're going to go, yes, I do. And if you look, it then will automatically pull every single project I have ever worked on. So let's say that you have a Windows computer at home, but you have a Chromebook for school. I can code from my Chromebook if I want to by going to vscode.dev and then grabbing my repository. It says it's empty, which makes it sad. So we don't get to use our GitHub tutorial today. So as an alternative, I am going to pull up one of my homework projects here. Let's see. Let's do my final. Why not? But then if you look, Visual Studio Code will start pulling all of my projects, my project files here, and you will see in these little parentheses, it says GitHub. So while it's working on that, essentially what this is doing is letting me code from anywhere I want. Now, I know I said GitHub doesn't work too well with PHP. When I say that, I mean GitHub Pages specifically doesn't like it, but you can share PHP files or whatever you want from there. And again, we have our friend README. This is where you can see all of that project's details. And in here, I can add, this project is creating a web-driven application. And then I can save that. Now, if I were to go over here to my source control, I have that little 1. There's a change that I've made. And as you can see from that little pop-up, your changes will be committed, which means they're saved like a draft and then immediately pushed back to GitHub. So I'm going to say I added to the README. And I'm going to send that over to GitHub. Now, it's no longer there, but if I were to go back to my GitHub, and instead of going to my Navigate tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and go to that I210 final. Got to place some URL tag here. Now, if I go to that final, you will see, hey, look, I added to the README. So automatically they are linked together and basically let me jump from project to project. I can share whatever I want with people. And that is just the start. If I had a whole bunch of updates to my code and I were to push them, they would show up there. I like to think of GitHub as the cloud storage for my projects because sometimes I'll be on a work computer, sometimes I'll be on my home computer, sometimes I will be on a random computer in my grandmother's basement. I need to be able to code from anywhere, and that is the glory of GitHub. So that is pretty much the gist of it. I highly recommend that all of you check out GitHub. If you haven't used it now, you will start using it in the future. And if you want to check me out a little bit, you can probably find me on social media. I know you guys, you'll hunt me down. But you can check out my website at snowykit.in. And I really I thank all of you for taking the time to kind of check out GitHub. Hopefully in the future, you all will start using it and realize how amazing it is. And I can already see that there are some questions